Because the turmoil isn't over yet in this nation. Why would we expect it to be? It's very interesting. I was talking to a couple of young people a couple of days ago. One was a young man. He was about 33 or so years old. Another was a young woman. She was about 25 or so. And I asked them if they had ever heard of Angela Davis. No. And I began going down the list of certain names from, like the civil rights movement and all. Of course, they had heard of Martin Luther King, But they were oblivious to these names that I grew up with, to the names of the people whose pictures were on my bedroom walls, while I was growing up. The people that were so crucial to even the embracing of Martin Luther King, during the civil rights movement and even afterwards as well. These folks were something else, that were very, very instrumental in our wellness today. And it was very interesting to me. And was interesting is that those were kind of young people, to me, But earlier in that day, I was speaking to this gentleman. He was about 70 years old, African American, in the neighborhood, with his weapon, attached in his holster and all. Proud to be an American. And this African American elderly gentleman, he was angry at the protesters in Baltimore, at the protesting. And so I asked him, I said, there were people that were protesting. The only reason, and he lived in a nice neighborhood, a nice home and all, the reason you are where you are today is because of the protesting that someone else did in your time. You know that better than me. And he's like, oh yeah. It was like he remembered. I think as African Americans, sometimes forgetting the important, the not so distant history is not just limited to the young people, it's to the old people as well. Sometimes we take for granted the wellness that we have and the liberties that we enjoy. And yes, even the equality that we have in this nation as African Americans. There's a lot of mess going on, and we're going to talk about that. But realize that the only reason that they are as good as things are as good as they are today is because of the protesting and the sacrifices that folks made before us. Many of them are not here today. So before we get to, arrogant and smug, talking about the choices that people make and all, realizing that the reality of our lives today, the wellness isn't simply because of our choices. It's because of the choices that others made historically, even to the peril and sacrifice of their own lives, so we can be well today. And what's very interesting is that most of the people, the struggle that we call the civil rights struggle, and the struggle that really was the civil rights struggle, well, most African Americans were not involved in those struggles, but they did reap the benefits of the sacrifices of those who did participate in the struggles. So I think it's very important for us to begin to really, in humility, recognize that our wellness today isn't simply based on the choices that we made in life, and that's why it's so well. But the suffering of so many black folks and white folks, but so many black folks before us. Because even if you were, and I appreciate the sacrifices of the other races, even in the civil rights movement or the human rights movement that went across this nation in the 50s and 60s especially. But the reality was certain folks could, step out of that particular environment of protesting and demonstrating in the middle of the night and slip back into another neighborhood and pass for someone who doesn't have to suffer the brunt of racial injustices. So I'm not taking anything away from people who were not of color that sacrificed for the civil rights movement, but they could step in and out of that environment anytime they wanted to, and they chose to be there. It's the difference between the draft and the volunteer military. I think you can sort of understand the lament of those who were drafted into the military and forced to fight compared to those who volunteered and went voluntarily. The same with the civil rights movement. The black people were forced into that situation simply because of the color of their skin. where folks, like maybe white folks that, helped out in the struggle tremendously, still it was volunteer, had the option to slip out in the darkness of night, in the still of night if they chose. And so I think it's very important. It's very important for us as African Americans to recognize the sacrifices of those who came before us. That's why I take issue with, especially, I know this thing is going around now about, why we have to be called African Americans, why the African part, we're all Americans, but you don't see Irish Americans saying, well, don't call me Irish American, or any other group. It's just us, African American. And for me, I embrace that African American. Now, my grandfather's Mexican, my mother's dad, Mexican, but still, I embrace the African American part for the rest of me. Because I recognize the sufferings and the pain and the sorrow and the heartache that my own blood, my own ancestors, people maybe had the same nose as me or the same ears as me, had to suffered through on the path to get me to where I am today. And it seems like, in this time where I get to enjoy the comfort from their discomfort, that why would I disown a very real part of who they were? No other group in America does that, but we're just all Americans. Come on now. So that's for me, African American. Because I think it's very important especially for us as African Americans who have such a unique and terrible, history in this nation, that we never lose sight of those that came, those that sacrificed before us, because their suffering was so terrible, so heinous. Okay, and I think it is only in remembering. This is my belief. Now I know a lot of folks don't agree, and I have friends that don't agree, educated friends that don't agree about the whole African American thing. Why should we hang on to that? We're just Americans. But what I'm going to suggest today, I want you just to think about for a moment, is that when we look at our young people today, take it from another perspective, so forget the African American part, but keep that in the back of our mind, because it is history and it's real, okay? When we look at the young people today, especially, just messing things up, a lot of African American youth, maybe not taking advantage of the schooling and that's given to them free of charge, or even acting right in school to take full advantage of the opportunities that are offered to them. And even some of the lifestyle choices and some of the particular personality and character traits that they desire to embrace, and walk in. That we readily admit that much of their issues are due to the fact that they really don't consciously realize the sacrifices, what exactly people went through so they could get a public education that's equal to white folks, that they can get jobs, or they can live in a place basically for the most part where they want to if they can afford it. So many things that are opportunities that are being squandered by a lot of our African American youth are simply, I believe, because they really don't know what went down before them. They haven't a clue as far as history goes. And most of us admit that. If they only knew. If we could just sit down, and have, to me, like a class, like even when I came up, there was black literature, there was black this or black that, but I know it can't be done, but it should be mandatory. Well, maybe it shouldn't be mandatory because this is America. But it should be mandatory in the households of every African American that we know our history. And I don't mean a legal mandate, but I just mean a moral mandate, simply in honor of those that came before us. Because like my child, I tell her stories, I teach her anything that I can, simply to help her be aware, to understand, why things are and how things are changed. So it's very important. So if it's important for these young people today to recognize their history, then why is it less important to us now as enlightened, educated African Americans to maintain the African American name, to maintain a conscious reality of our history? History is history. So if it's not important for us, it's not important to them, but we can look at them. Since we're almost like in the experiment, we are the subject, so it's very difficult to measure the the circumstances in our own experiment that we are the subjects of, but we can look at the experiment then of these young people, of these young African Americans who are clueless of the sacrifices that were, I mean, when I see young people that are playing hooky from school, or when I walk into the local high school, Dunbar High School, I'm the mailman. When I walk into Dunbar High School every morning and I see kids sitting in the office, you know, just kind of rude with their legs sticking out, you know, kind of smirking like they're getting over. And the reality is, the reality of the situation is they're like running from their own success. They're not getting over it. But if they only realize the sacrifices that folks went through, the folks that were killed and shot and scoffed and rebutted for even trying to attend to a desegregated school, make schools desegregated, I would think that they would appreciate the situation that they're running away from, that they're squandering right now. It's like if somebody walks in your house, you know, and you have something very valuable on the table, and they just put their feet up on the coffee table and knock it off and break it. You know, it's like they don't realize the value of that thing. And if that was the thing that I was supposed to pass on down to him, you know, when I died, it was like they just squandered something very valuable and don't even realize it. History. It's very important. And so it was very important. So I sat down with those young people that didn't know who Angela Davis was, and really expressed to them about her, and then about the civil rights movement, and even expressed. Now, my opinion was that the real civil rights movement were the Black Panthers. Now, Angela Davis wasn't a Black Panther. She worked with the Black Panthers, but those were the civil rights. Those were the people, the Black Panthers for self-defense. Those are the people that had eating programs and reading programs and trying food programs for the young people that weren't getting enough food, for, you know, study programs to help them be educated better in their communities. Self-defense for the neighborhoods who are being abused by the Oakland police. You know, this was the civil rights, demanding civil rights. You know, we see the pictures and we hear about and I've presented before about the Black Panthers for self-defense standing on the courthouse steps with their shotguns in hand because it was legal. But they not only had their shotguns in hand, they had law books in hand as well. These were students. These were young people. These were law students, many of them. Educated young people. And that's not hard to believe. Because you recognize all through our history, the spearheading many of the protests, many of the anti-this and anti-that, the protests, are usually the young, educated folks who like, we can't live like this, we can't be this way. And that's what you had in the Civil Rights Movement. Now, the Human Rights Movement, now that was something else. That's from Martin Luther King. We always attribute Martin Luther King to the Civil Rights Movement. His was more of a human rights issue, where he was, even with the Vietnam War, connecting the oppression of the Vietnamese people to the Black people in America, connecting the oppression of the South African people to the Black people in this nation. And so just to realize the real civil rights movement goes unnoticed, and also is attached to it a negative vibe, you know, the Black Panthers. Now, the Black Panthers for self-defense is what they were. And so we talked a long time, and I even gave him, I said, go to the internet and plug in Angela Davis, and there's this little 8-minute video of her being interviewed while she was in prison. She was wearing a little red turtleneck sweater, and it's about 8 minutes. It just gives you a feel for, you know, the mind of a person. It's easily to label someone. We see it all the time on our news stations. They label them how we want to view them. But just listen. I think the problem today is we don't listen to folks. We don't listen to folks now. And we have at our access today everything, you know, we can imagine, any kind of historical thing we can imagine. Oh, we have access right at our fingertips on the internet. And our young people today are so computer savvy, you know, so know all how to use these devices and the internet and the smartphones and all that stuff. But too often, well, they know all the artists. They know who, you know, Kendall Jenner and, you know, Kylie and all the Kanye. They know all the folks out there, all the music, all the songs, things I don't even know. I mean, I knew my folks from my time, you know. But I'm just saying there's so much information available that is very necessary for these young people to know historically about who they are. But nobody's directing them to those paths. Now, for me, personally, when I started that day, that was 2 days ago, with these two young people, a 30-year-old and a 25-year-old. And I expressed to them, there was this book called Waiting Till the Midnight Hour by Peniel Joseph that I've read a couple of times. Started reading maybe 2 years ago or so. That chronicles the Black Power movement in America. in the United States. And it's very, very good. And so we're going to start coming together and meeting and maybe reading a chapter or two and then meeting on it. I know folks that meet with, have philosophy book club meetings and other kind of book clubs meeting, but this thing is just so important. If you want to be a part, just, my telephone number's at the end of this program. Text me. Don't call. Text the number or send me an email to the email address that you'll see at the end of this program at all. And you'd be glad to be a part of it. Anything possible. I guess I said all that to say this. I was listening to listening to NPR on Saturdays, and there's this woman. I think she's from somewhere in Africa, but she's real educated and really cool. And it's like a women's program where she has other educated women on talking about current events and all. And just recently, this past Saturday, they were having this conversation, about the issues of the black folks in America, which basically is the totality of their program every week. But one or two of them had the lament, and they were expressing that it was important for white folks to begin to get, it's their fault, and they need to make some inroads, and they're not trying to change, and all, and that's the reason why there's so much suffering. And then I was glad that one of the host of the program, chimed in. What would be their incentive? I mean, for us, even as African Americans, probably the majority of people that are watching this program, when we have the immigration situation with the Mexicans that are trying to come here, trying to immigrate here because they're leaving a terrible situation, just trying to make it. That how much does that affect us, in a positive way, as far as for them, or how many times do we just get angry with them? Or when all those Mexican children about a year or so ago were coming across, without their parents, and they were suffering, and their situation was kind of jacked up. How moved were we to get busy and help them? Not too busy. It wasn't anything different than any other news piece that's shown on the news that you look at for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, and you maybe have a little feeling this way or that way, but then the next piece of news comes on, Bruce Jenner is having a sex change or something like that, and we forget totally about, what it is we were just looking at. I mean, that's how we are. So I'm saying is, so we're not really moved by the sufferings of other people. So what is the incentive for white folks to be moved for the sufferings of other people? Us, okay? There's really no incentive. So I'm not hating on anybody. What I'm suggesting is, and I refuse to believe that our wellness in this nation is totally determined by whether some other people want to help us or not. I mean, at the risk of sounding like certain them, are do we feel that entitled? Or how about this? Do we feel that handicapped? That helpless? That we can't pick our own selves up? I mean, that's my question. And I'm not being harsh on anybody. I'm trying to make a point, because I think we need to get our minds, off of the idea that we need help. We always feeling like that we need help. Now, I admit that once the slaves were free back in 1865 or whatever, that there needed to be some help, because you had people that were totally brainwashed that couldn't fend for themselves, en masse. And so there had to be particular programs to help them, even along the path of life and certain generations. But now, come on, it's 2015. Now I think it's about time for us to wake up, and I admit that it's not easy to just change one's mind. But I think there is a responsibility to folks that do see, to the enlightened folks. I was speaking to an individual recently, a city leader, a mayor of another city close to us, about a week or so ago. And I was, and their city isn't, that jacked up like ours is, but I was expressing to him some ideas that I had, that there are folks that know things that need to begin to enlighten folks that don't. And he was like, well, you think the city leaders are going to get together? I'm like, city leaders have nothing to do with this. Even the moment you call yourself a city leader, you interjected this ego thing. There's too much ego walking around, and there's too much money, too much I'm this or I'm that, I need to be recognized as this. Whatever you call yourself. And that is a human trait. The moment we start getting some press, the moment we start getting some recognition, there's an ego kicks in. And I don't really know what the answer to that is, but as far as city leaders, I don't believe that is the solution, because if it were the solution, it would have been done by now. What I'm suggesting today is instead of lamenting, and especially like educated or enlightened, African Americans looking around and wondering what's wrong with our young people, or wishing they'd act right, or or being even mad at the police or the particular governments of those cities, there was a responsibility that we have. I believe that the fact that if you are enlightened, if you see what someone else doesn't see, you have a responsibility to help them to see. And it's not always going to be easy. I remember once years ago I was in this church, and I was like going into the neighborhoods. I think it was like just Parkside or somewhere to try to help folks that needed some help. And I talked to these people in this church, and they thought it was a great idea. And so Saturday we're going to meet and then go down to this neighborhood. And when I showed up, man, the parking lot was full, man, and I was thrilled. And all these people, they must have really, feel like I feel. Let's go in the community and try to see where people need help and try to help them. As it turned out, there was an entrepreneur meeting going on in the church that day where people were learning the secrets on becoming rich, And it was only me going in that neighborhood, man. And I have to admit, it broke me, man. I was like, gosh, really? But all it takes is, there are many of these. It wasn't long before people started coming and joining and helping, and that was a good thing. What I'm suggesting today is that it's the ordinary people in the neighborhoods. It's us. If you see what others don't see, you have a responsibility. That's what I believe. And even to the folks that I'm talking to right now that are listening, maybe say there's 100 people, maybe listening to this program right now. If 2 people hear what I'm hearing, I'm cool with that. But there needs to be. So I think everybody doesn't feel like there's a responsibility or anything owed to folks around. But I want to bring it back to our historical lineage that folks sacrificed for us who they didn't know. And even back then, folks sacrificed for folks that they didn't know. They sacrificed their lives. They sacrificed their livelihood. They sacrificed, many of them, their families and even their freedom. And I'm just suggesting we need to find a way to sacrifice just a little bit of time to enlighten folks. And so I'm meeting some folks, there's just 2 people, within the next week or so. And just because I have my ideas, but no one can do anything alone, but just a brainstorm. And I'm not one of these conspiracy guys. I know we all have those buddies that are conspiracy theorists, the Rothschild this, the Illuminati, the white man this, and there's a face on the moon that looks like a black man, and all. There's no time for conspiracy theories. True or not. Even if there was some, I don't put that much stock in certain folks being that bright. Just like those Willie Lynch letters, I don't know if y'all ever heard of those. Those turned out to be fictitious. Letters weren't even written in the language of the times, okay? But I don't put that much stock in the sense of folks to have, especially to have that much insight to be able to pull off something like that. But even if they were true, even if the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, the Willie Lynch letters, or all these other conspiracies, even if they were true, in your little circle, in your little pocket, in my little circle, in my little pocket, and we can expand it, people can be well even in the midst of all that. That's what I'm suggesting. See, if nothing else, what I've learned in these past 2 elections with Barack Obama is that anything is possible, even the most impossible. And I know, right after he was elected, there were folks saying, especially like on particular news channel, okay, there's no more racism, stop decrying racism, it's kind of crazy. And see, you could be president, you'd be focused on the rapping and the singing and the basketball, you could be president. But the reality is, no, most people are not going to be that. I think what it showed us is there's a way. There is always a way. There is no limitation. You just have to find that way. And I think that's where we've dropped it. What I'm suggesting today is you just have to find a way. Whatever your situation is, don't settle for less. Find a way. Find a way. Whatever your situation is, there's a way. Now, of course, we got a big asteroid that's coming down to hit planet Earth. There's no way you probably can stop that. But in your circle, in your world, the influences that you're having on your kids, there are ways to make life better. Just don't settle for less. That's all I'm saying. For real. It can be done. Anything's possible. So that's what I'm going to leave you with, just a little bit of encouragement. And my enthusiasm in maintaining knowledge of history and even embracing African American for my name. Because this Irish guy, Irish American, he's not going to give that up. Come on, especially on St. Patrick's Day, right? The Italian American, they're proud of being Italian American. Chinese American, everybody's proud of who they are except for us. No, we're just Americans, we want to drop it. But really, you're not. That's what I want to close today with a thought. Okay? I think sometimes as African Americans, we even with the Civil Rights Movement, what I see with the Civil Rights Movement, the whole movement, is that it was just a peg, or maybe a baton, in the race from way in the beginning, from even the times the slaves got here, to the times when there was little rebellions that were put down, and maybe the slaves executed, and some acquiescing to slavery, but then other slaves began to, well, we need to learn how to read, or at least teach our children to read. We need to try to escape, thwarted, killed, executed, tortured, but eventually come to the point where, emancipation, and then a lot of suffering and mistreatment even after Jim Crow and all this, mess, prejudice, racism, persecution, and all this Civil Rights Movement, the victories and the losses and the victories and the losses and the victories. And then even through today, as we're trying to get better. But it looks to me, all through that course, that time, there has been like batons being carried and passed on to different segments of that journey. But it's almost like that baton has been just laying there and waiting for someone to pick it up. As much as I like, all Al Sharpton and a lot of those older brothers out there that were part of the Civil Rights Movement, that time is done, for that particular way. I mean, it's good to have that knowledge of history, but the tactics that Martin Luther King used back in those days are not going to work today. We've seen that. We've seen that in Ferguson. We've even seen that in Baltimore. We've even seen that everywhere. And it's just not going to work. I mean, those people are going to have the dogs put on. They're going to be shot. They're going to be killed. There has to be another way. Okay. But in all fairness to Mr. Sharpton and the people like him that are the elderly gentlemen from the Civil Rights Movement era and all, is that there's nothing else going on. That's what we got to do. I know with my daughter, I've wanted her to work out, all of her life. She's 10 years old now. When she was in kindergarten, I had her in the martial art for 2 years, something that I knew about that I could help her train with. And then it was like she didn't want to do that anymore. Then we're running, me and her. I'm running with her. Daddy's running with her. I can do this too. Then we're doing a little martial art thing again. Now, within the past 5 months or so, she wanted to do this life cycle thing, something that I don't know anything about. It has all these gadgets on there. It has your cardio. You can have what kind of terrain you're, all that kind of stuff, or what kind of speed. And you can watch your heart rate while you're doing all this stuff that I'm not familiar with. And that's totally cool with me, because all I could do, until she found something that worked for her, all I could do was help her with the things that I know how to do. That's all Brother Sharpton is doing right now, because there's nothing else happening. For real. And it's not really the time for violence. That's a picture of the past as well. Because there are times you keep getting hit, or shot, mistreated enough times, you're going to strike out. And then they're wondering why you're burning your own stuff down. Just be glad I'm just burning my own stuff down. Just don't keep it up. It's almost like a sickness, You got a manifestation of an illness on your foot or something. Well, it's just on your foot, just on your foot. I guarantee you keep ignoring it, it's going to spread. How many of us experienced that in life before? But what I'm telling you, it's not about the violence. But it's not about the marching either. It's about the communities wising up, and it's about the enlightened people, just the regular citizens. Bump the city leaders. They haven't done anything yet. They're living in the nice neighborhoods. I know. I deliver some of their mail too. And I'm not ragging on them, but that's not the way it's going to get done. The way it's going to get done is on a level, what they call the grassroots level. Because there was a lot of educated people. There's a lot of enlightened people. They don't have to be educated by school, but educated in enlightenment. Educated folks in the neighborhoods that have to be organized in a way. Someone has to help organize to come together and find a way to be able to enlighten the masses of people. As far as even realizing that there's something different, wanting something different. I think maybe the inroads need to be made to the mothers out there, even in the hood or in some of the lower economic depressed areas, because the mothers have always been instrumental in all these movements, because there's a particular love, a care, a concern that a mother has, and who wants her children to be better. And something needs to come of that, but it has to be on the level of not looking for more money from the government, not looking for the city leaders to do anything, not looking for white folks to change. Something that we have to do.